This little light of mine, a flickering light. A little over 3 years ago, the Druge swept out of the forests of Lustri to begin the conquest of Zenith. Out of the Sarangrave they came, and one by one the spires went dark. The highborn armies held them at Proceres for 6 months, but then the disastrous destruction of the Golden Cascade saw the tide turn and the last Imperial soldiers forced to abandon the territory. 3 long years of darkness and despair ensued. But even that darkness was not absolute. There were moments of light and hope. The Urizen know that no matter how bleak the shadows may seem, they will always ultimately fall before the light. Sometimes it is easier to curse the darkness than to light that light, however. After an abortive first attempt, the Empire has managed to establish a precarious presence in Zenith, but that might change at any moment. The Druge seem absolutely set on ensuring that Zenith remains their twisted playground. In the months leading to the spring equinox, they held their ground, preventing the Empire from liberating Clipion. Imperial heroes won a significant victory during the equinox, venturing through the Sentinel Gate to prevent the orcs poisoning the ruined marshes at the heart of the territory. Now, the Imperial armies need to try and capitalize on what the heroes have achieved. And try they do. Citadel Guard, we have pushed our way into Zenith. We are here, and we are not leaving until Zenith is ours once again. We will use our wisdom to avoid the Druge traps. We will show our loyalty to our fellow citizens that are suffering, and we will take pride in reclaiming our land. Nicasia Avicia of Phoenix Reach, General of the Citadel Guard. The people of Urizen need you, Eastern Sky. Let us prove to them that Dawn has not abandoned them, and that our loyalty to them as fellow Imperials runs deep. I, your new general, will be marching by your side from now until my final day. Death to the Druge! Dame Aurum de Castellan, General of the Eastern Sky. We are one empire. Our siblings in Urizen bleed and suffer. We march to stand at their side as virtue guides us. March in pride as the Eastern Sky before us. Shields to the front, step to contact. Kindra Edasdotter, General of the Fist of the Mountain. Towerjacks, once again we try to drive the Druge from Imperial territory. Guided by the clarity of the Master Strategist, we will steadily move into Clipion, and if possible, Iteri. Show the people of Zenith we stand with them against the Druge. Steel guard our bodies, virtue guard our souls. Natalia, the Falcon, Barossa, General of the Towerjacks. Sisters, brothers, siblings, take pride. Your courage and loyalty in standing by the Citadel Guard to protect the people and souls of Urizen has been recognized. The Urizen and Loyalty Assemblies call for others to join in this virtuous crusade for the salvation of Zenith. The Druge are many, rattled and angry. They will make us bleed. Our example will echo long after our deaths. Look to the west and see proof of your inspiration. Wintermark comes from across the Empire to join us. Urizen does not stand alone, and neither do we. For virtue, for Urizen, for the Empire. Asenath, General of the Granite Pillar. 7th Wave will bring virtuous crusade alongside our siblings from the other Imperial nations. May we bring swift death to the Druge. Cuth, General of the 7th Wave. While the valiant Pegasus, the Wolves of War, and the Ironhelms are needed elsewhere, they are replaced by the Towerjacks and by the Fist of the Mountain. The latter marches across the entire breadth of the Empire from Calavesa, empowered by autumn magic to find the best path to bring them to Zenith in time to join the attack. With the arrival of the warriors of Wintermark, there are nearly 40,000 Imperial soldiers in Zenith, including nearly 10,000 warriors from units fighting under the spired banner of the Citadel Guard. These warbands are effortlessly folded into the strategy of the Sentinels alongside whom they fight. Autumn magic ensures that they are bound together into a seamless whole greater than the sum of the parts. The granite pillar, the tower jacks, and the seventh wave are also supported by valuable Imperial magic. The soldiers of all three armies fight with the clarity of the master strategist, allowing them to make and execute strategic and tactical plans more effectively, whether individually or in unison with their fellows. It's not the only thing that binds the Imperial forces together. There is an almost subtle aura of grim camaraderie between the soldiers of the 5 nations who fight in Zenith this season. Perhaps it is the influence of these enchantments. Perhaps it is the orders of the generals that remind their soldiers of the bonds that tie them to their fellow Imperials. Perhaps it is the unwavering gaze of the 3 watchers. Perhaps it is the inspirational virtue of the granite pillar and the seventh wave. Perhaps it is a reaction to the painful anniversary of the Druge invasion. Perhaps it is some combination of these things. Whatever it is, for the first time in several years, there is something new stirring in Zenith, despite the smothering despair. A spark kindles in the darkness. A fragile hope blossoms in the barren soil among the mountains of Zenith. Fragile indeed, in the face of the relentless hatred of the Druge and their foul miasma. Smothering darkness. There may be 40,000 Imperial soldiers fighting to free Zenith, but there are an equal number of Orc warriors here. Bound by the magic of the Citadel Guard, the Druge have chosen to fight rather than retreat into the Sarengrave. Those who were trapped here are joined by further Orc troops, marching out of the dark forests of the northeast. They seem to want nothing less than the absolute destruction of the Imperial armies, and to rout all of those they cannot slaughter back into Morrow. The rivers of life flow through Zenith. Any wound that is not fatal will be healed overnight, but that does nothing to quell the reckless fury of the Druge. At the forefront of the Druge counterattack are those under the banner of the Poison Crane, whose warriors take every opportunity to engage in wanton bloodshed. They leave the matter of actually driving the Empire out of Clipion to others. Such considerations are secondary to their goal of murdering as many Imperial soldiers as possible. They are supported in their crimson endeavour by the skirmishers of the Hidden Widow and the Deadly Blade, who take every opportunity to set up ambushes, feints, and traps that lure Imperial soldiers into deadly situations. They are encountered everywhere, distributing poisoned weapons to their allies and employing spears doused in serpent-tooth blade venom to deadly effect. The wounds these warriors inflict rapidly turn sour and septic in spite of the wellspring of healing power that infuses the territory. After the first few engagements, the seers of Urizen report that it seems these 2 Druge armies are under the effect of a spring magic enchantment that empowers them to spread pestilence and suffering. The waters may burgeon with life, but that only serves to blunt the effectiveness of their magic. The Empire is lucky they are not facing these armies under more normal circumstances. Or worse, trying to fight them while the rivers run red. The rest of the Druge forces are a little more cautious, although they also possess deadly allies. As well as the Druge themselves, there are the tormented souls of former imperial heroes now trapped in undying bondage by the malice of the Buruk Tepel. They sow a particular terror among even the bravest. Everyone who encounters them cannot help but fear that the same unspeakable fate might befall them. The Druge have woven their dark magic in western Zenith, raising their enchanted fortifications over Lustri and Proceres. Scouts report that the former, at least, is familiar. The woods are dark and deep and rich with spring magic that seeks to devour the enemies of the Druge. The enchantment in Proceres, however, is something else. The Imperial heroes stopped the main thrust of the Druge plan, but they have woven malign magic into the marshes, and the enchanted fortification they have raised there is a terror indeed. In the days after the spring equinox, a great creaking labyrinth of sigil-studded rotting wood and mud and coiling mist rose around the dripping ruins of the Golden Cascade. The scouts speak fearfully of the things that dwell there. Wide-eyed, orc-like creatures cloaked in living shadow, able to move unseen through the fog, and whose touch sears like a blazing brand. Venomous octopuses the size of small dogs that seem equally at home in water and air, and seem to have an insatiable lust for warm flesh, and worse things in the heart of the labyrinth. The mountains run red. Two nearly equally matched forces, with magic on both sides, both fighting for control of Clipion. The irresistible force of the eastern sky at the fore, the thunderous flame of the highborn armies flanking them, the Empire throws itself into battle. Time and again the Empire and the Druge clash. The lines shift to and fro across the foothills of Clipion. At first the Druge have the advantage, but then the Fist of the Mountain join the fray and the Empire pushes the orcs back. Then the Druge reinforcements arrive from deeper into the Malum, and the tide shifts the other way, and Imperial troops lose the ground they have taken. In the end, though, despite all their malign sorcery and all their hate, the Druge are pushed back. The Empire, only by the slightest margin, gains the upper hand. The Druge are pushed east, and the Empire is able to hold the ruined and battered spires it liberates. There are few people left in Clipion, in this high battlefield, but those who do remain, who have survived the tender mercies of the Druge domination, finally come out of hiding. Inspired by the virtuous auras created by Aurum of the Nightingale Temple, and buoyed up by the imperial victory, they take up arms and flock to join the Citadel Guard. They are joined by many former refugees, eager to return to Zenith to fight alongside the Citadel Guard to free their homes. The light spreads. The embers quicken in more hearths. The darkness is driven back. But only a little. For all their conviction, the Imperial armies are unable to complete the liberation of Clipion. The eastern hills, the last handful of spires, the pillars that anchor the will-sapping miasma of fear, these remain in the hands of the Druge as the summer solstice approaches. The Druge are more interested in murder than protecting ground, but the effect is similar. The Empire is able to consolidate their position, but they still do not have the beachhead in Zenith. There is a very real possibility that the Druge might still rally and drive them back again into Morrow. It is a galling thought, But what victory the Empire has secured was in part ceded to them by the Druze strategy. If the Orcs had been less focused on slaughter, and had instead fought to defend the territory, or worse yet, had adopted tactics specifically designed to drive the Imperial armies out of Clipion, then the heroes of the Empire might have been denied the progress they did manage to make. A progress that has been dearly bought. The rivers of life have greatly reduced the number of humans and orcs slain, but more than 2,500 Imperial soldiers have still laid down their lives in Zenith this season, fighting the Druze. The orcs themselves have lost far fewer of their own warriors, but only because the Empire's focus was on defeating rather than slaughtering them. On the other hand, the Druze have been driven closer to losing their stranglehold on Clipion. The Empire has beaten them, stopped them reclaiming the mountains, and pushed them back. That has not gone unnoticed. Not by the soldiers of the Empire, not by those flocking to the banner of the Citadel Guard, and not by the remaining Urizen left under the heel of the Druze. The Trods of Zenith. Shortly after the spring equinox, the tattered Trods of Zenith finally collapse. While it has been extremely difficult for Stridings to get into the Druze-dominated territory to walk them, they should have held together for at least another few years. It seems likely that someone or something associated with the Druze has taken action to tear them down. Some Vates speculate that it might be a side effect of whatever magic the Gulai used in Proceres to reinforce their magical fortifications. Others wonder if the twisted basilisk's ravaging of mana sites and Regio in the lead-up to the spring equinox might be to blame, while a few mutter darkly about the twisted magicians from the Palace of the Sleepers, rumoured to be in Zenith. A few point to Kavor Aipil, the wicked Buruk Tepel responsible for the creation of the tormented souls, and opine that this is all a part of their sinister master plan, whatever that might turn out to be. Regardless, the fact remains that the Trods have unravelled, and the dance of Navarre and Thorn will need to be performed once more. The presence of the Citadel Guard means it might be possible to restore the Trods from Anvil during the coming summit. Some Vates are not convinced this is the wisest course of action. If the loss of the Trods is due to enemy action, what is to stop them tearing them down as soon as the Navarre replace them? Or anyone else, of course. One consequence of the Dance of Navarre and Thorn being part of Imperial law is that anyone can use the ritual to create Trods, not just the Navarre Vates, so the decision might theoretically be taken out of their hands. Game information. The Empire has made a small amount of headway in Zenith. They are now 9/10 of the way toward capturing Clipion. If they are able to take the region, Iteri will be isolated from the rest of the territory, and it will be harder for the Druze to defend it. Over the course of the last few months, the Citadel Guard received significant reinforcements thanks to the mandate upheld by the Urizen Assembly. Their numbers have been bolstered by 1,000 additional troops. If the Citadel Guard remain on campaign here until Zenith is retaken, and no more land in the territory is under the control of the Druze, then the new recruits will gladly serve. If the Citadel Guard leaves Zenith to fight elsewhere, or if the attack falters and is repulsed, then those Urizeni recruits will desert. The new troops would abandon their positions, and the Citadel Guard would immediately lose 1,000 points of effective strength. If that reduction took the remaining army strength below 1,000, then the army would break. There is a Druze miasma covering Zenith that weakens the Imperial ability to claim territory. In addition to that, Zenith still has the terrorized quality. The tormented spirits that the Druge have created from Urizen and highborn captives continue to use their supernatural strength to slaughter the weak and exploit every vulnerability they can identify. As a consequence, any Imperial army in Zenith that drops to 1,500 strength, or 2,250 if large, will disband. The only way to permanently remove this quality would be to deal with the threat presented by the tormented souls, which will require an opportunity, most likely a battle. Finally, as a consequence of Druge magic wielded in Zenith during the spring equinox, the region of Proceres has now permanently gained the Nightwoven quality. Any dripping echoes of the Fen enchantment that targets that region is significantly enhanced in strength as long as the quality remains. During the spring equinox, there were 2 opportunities for Imperial heroes to deal with the hungry dead loose in the territory. At Lutum Descent, the Empire were successful in destroying the temporary Regio and preventing the winter spirits from threatening Imperial forces. Unfortunately, they were less successful at Carinian Spring, meaning that the Druge were able to deal with the threat of winter spirits attacking their own troops and leaving a dark pit of hungry dead in the depths of Clipion. Between the rivers of life, the vigilance of the Imperial armies, and the cunning of the tainted basilisk's magicians, this means that while there were certainly unliving horrors in Zenith during the last few seasons, the problem has largely been dealt with. Apart, of course, from those clustered at the Carinian Spring. Let it shine. Battle. A major conjunction has been identified in Zenith. The Imperial prognosticators have identified a major conjunction that will reach Clipion during the summer solstice. They believe it offers an opportunity to claim the beachhead in Zenith, as well as a chance to capitalize on the renewed hope of the Urizeni people, inspiring the spires of Redoubt and Morrow. Along with former Zenith refugees, a clear victory over the Druge might create an opening for those citizens to offer significant assistance in driving the remaining Druge out of Iteri, potentially leaving Imperial forces free to address the daunting challenge of conquering ruined Proceres.